Injuries do suck, but recovery is cool. Will Carroll joining us right now, injury expert, and make sure you go check out his Substack, his newsletter, Under the Knife. Give it a follow. He's awesome. He's going to join us throughout the season to give us expert analysis on the injuries that you need to know more about. Will, great to see you. I'm going to try and do a little positivity first. Let's talk about a couple players that are coming back. So I'll start with Shohei Ohtani. I don't think there's any past precedent on what he's dealing with. So I'll let you handle how he returns from a second elbow surgery to pitch and to maintain his incredible hitting prowess.
Yeah, that's the thing. He should be comeback player of the year, but can you be a comeback player if you didn't go away? Obviously he's kind of two versions. So the hitting version, pretty good. Pitching version, also pretty good, but we've never had this kind of thing. I do think Mark Pryor had a great point the other day in that he was saying it's not like he was pitching last year, but he was rehabbing. And the rehabbing so regimented, you have to do all these things. You have to get in your work every single day. And he did that. So it's not like pitching and hitting is unusual for him. He's done it for years. What's unusual is being able to do it at the same time and the type of surgery he has, which is still something of a mystery. Dr. Neil Elitrosh for the Dodgers still hasn't told exactly what he did. And with these augmented elbow reconstructions, let alone a revision, we just don't have a lot of data to work on. Everything so far has looked really positive. So I'm curious about the timeline. I'm curious how they're going to work it in with Clayton Kershaw coming back, but starting on the 60-day. I'm just not sure how they're going to put things together, whether it's a 5-man or a 6-man. I just know what we've seen from Otani means everything is online with that rehab. If he were just a pitcher, we'd be talking about how good he looks rather than what an unusual case he is.
Okay, we don't know what he had. I want to know how slow are they going to have to take it, and then who's going to be back to full strength quicker, Otani pitching or Acuna and his knee? Because the Braves have said they're going to take it slow. The Dodgers have said they're going to take it slow with Otani. So who do you think will be back to 100% more rapid?
Well, do we get 200% out of Otani? I think with Otani, they're not just taking it slow, they're taking it ridiculously slow. We know it was an augmented procedure, and that internal brace is supposed to get you back faster. We've seen over and over in other sports, European soccer, these guys are coming back from ankle surgery in weeks. Even in baseball, if you remember when Mike Trout popped his thumb, we've had guys going all the way back to Dustin Pedroia. It used to be 6 to 8 weeks. Now it's 3 to 4 because of that augmented UCL. Same thing in the elbow, but we're not getting guys back faster because we're using a rehab that was designed in 1974. Frank Jobe came up with it. Mike Marshall tweaked it a little bit. Kevin Wilk has done a lot of good to it, but this 18-month time frame is ridiculous for something that was supposed to do it back. So I don't think they're taking it slow. They're taking it ridiculously slow. On Acuna, he's gone through this before. Obviously, it was the other knee. He knows the process. This was old hat. He wishes he didn't have to do it, but I don't think it's going to be a problem for him. We see NFL running backs coming back from this. We see pretty much everybody. ACLs are 6 to 9 months. So again, he's at the tail end of that. I don't think they have to take it easy with him. Obviously, I don't think he'll run as much, but I don't think there's going to be any deficits. He sure looked good coming back from the first one.
Hitting on, before I hit Rendon, hitting on Acuna, his exact quote was, "I feel way better than I did the last time." Are there things you can learn about players' bodies? I mean, he had the same injury, just on a different knee, as far as how to rehab them or how to break up scar tissue, because everybody scars differently. Are there things that you could learn from one rehab process then to the other leg, which is rare for most people, but on the same player?
No, it's more that you've just done it. You've gone through it. Everything is new the first time you do anything. So he knew what was coming. He knew what the schedule was. He knew he was going to come back fine from it. You get a lot of athletes, especially superb physical specimens, who don't know how to rehab because they've just basically cruised through their entire career. They're going to be away from their teammates somewhat. They're in pain. It's a whole new process. So it wasn't a new process. He'd probably be better with a third time, God forbid. But it's one of those situations where I think he's just more confident because he knows how well he came back last time.
Okay, talk about another superstar that's been injured a lot. Anthony Rendon was a star, and the injuries have been there. Now he's got a hip that pops up. When we look at it, we say, ooh, chronic hip, or wait a minute, if it's chronic, why was this not taken care of in October? What is the prognosis of somebody coming back from a second hip surgery?
Yeah, this is really interesting. The timing of it, it's as if they were just going to say, how can we get him out of here? But there is an injury. I'm not saying this is fraudulent. I'm not saying they're faking this whole thing. It's just, I don't think they cared at this stage. They didn't know whether he's going to play. He's going to get paid one way or the other. I don't know whether there's a disability policy on him. Most players don't have it because they're really expensive and don't pay off. So it's one of those situations where it's just tough. His body has broken down. And someday we'll be able to go in there and take a DNA swab and figure out whether somebody's going to hold together. I find it really interesting. Going back to Acuna, do we learn anything about his brother, who's an up and comer with the Mets? Because his brother has had bad knees. I don't know. We don't know about genetics, but it's really intriguing. With Rendon, he's just broken down. The timing is iffy, but I'm not sure how much he was going to play. The thing about him is it's not one thing. He's been on the IL 13 times, and it's like 11 different things if you count separate hamstring strains and things like that. So his body's just broken down, and you don't normally come back from that.
Well, come swab my DNA. It's perfect, by the way. Just saying. Just saying. Come swab it. You'll find nothing. Just saying. But now I must. And by the way, Rendon, the Angels don't have insurance on Rendon, so they're paying that whole freight, the whole thing. So, okay, that sucks for Artie Moreno, but as Scratch said, he was a superstar.
More in a minute, but first, a quick word from our sponsor of this video. Hey, this episode is sponsored by Orgain. And AJ, I know as a former big leaguer, you care about what you put in your body, but don't you also care about what tastes good? Don't you want to get a little protein action that actually tastes good if you're going to have it every day?
Absolutely. I had it today after my workout, Scott. It was great. I had chocolate, and vanilla and chocolate are my two favorites. I can't decide which one I like more, but I drink them after I work out. I worked out this morning, came right home, bam, 30 grams of protein through the Orgain. Perfect.
And so what should you do? Order both. Their new 30-gram complete protein shakes offer protein-packed real nutrition designed to satisfy those cravings without any added sugar. There are no quick fixes when it comes to your health. If you want more protein, give Orgain 30-gram protein shakes a try. Head to Orgain.com/FOUL30. Use code FOUL30 for 30% off your order. That's the best offer that you're going to find. You have to use the code FOUL30 for 30% off. And now back to the video.
Now, speaking of another star in New York, Giancarlo Stanton. Tennis elbow in both elbows. Have you ever heard of this? And what the heck is going on in New York? Because tennis elbow in both elbows as a hitter? It's not like he's playing out in the outfield throwing with both arms. I don't know.
It's a lot of tennis.
Yeah, and there's a couple interesting things here. First, it's probably not tennis elbow. I think he was looking for something understandable. So like tennis elbow, when Aaron Boone said that, I think it was just trying to explain it. It is tendinitis. With tennis elbow, it's a very specific type. It's because of the motion of the racket, which you don't have with the bat. Some of that vibration is going into the elbows and the arms, but not much. Even with these guys going in there and taking 1,000 cuts off the hit tracks or the traject, you just don't see this. Repetitive stress injuries like this are usually the result of these old wooden and metal rackets, and we've seen a significant reduction of that. So I think it's just tendonitis. I don't know the cause. He's always been a very tightly wound guy, so that could be part of it. He's big, he's huge, he swings really, really hard. But when we're looking at other guys in that range, they haven't had these issues. I think it's maybe a little bit interesting with Ohtani, given that he also pitches, so there's different stresses on the elbow. But this is just a really unusual one. I think the key here is that it was managed not just last year, but the year before. So this is an ongoing thing. They know how to get him ready to play, and he certainly looked good. If they can just do whatever it was they did in October for the entire year, I think that would be much better for the Yankees.
Is there a way to avoid that? I mean, talking specifically about, geez, tennis elbows or the tendinitis that he has in his elbows. Because as a player, if I'm looking on, I'm like, whoa, Giancarlo's jacked. He is huge. Like, how could he get hurt? I always wanted to figure out whatever it took, because if I got hurt, I wasn't not going to make the team. I was just not going to be playing anymore. So there's players out there that, is there a way to avoid this kind of thing? Or is it just like, some people have it, some people don't?
I think a little of that. I mean, going back to the genetics, it might be that. Some guys get really, really jacked and can't swing anymore, can't pitch. They lose flexibility. They lose the ability to recover. There are so many things we just don't know about injuries and susceptibility and recovery. There are some easy things. And when you think about things like diet and sleep, these are things that European soccer clubs have been focused on for decades. And baseball, they're just getting dietitians out. They're not tracking sleep because the union doesn't want that, and I can understand why. But there are a lot of things that players can do if we get away from this paternalistic model. How can we recover better? How can we energize ourselves better? How can we feed that battery that we have to keep recharging? So there's a lot of things we don't know, and baseball's done a very, very poor job of getting this into the game, researching it, advancing it, and making it more widely available, especially down the line. We need to make the minors better. We need to make the college game better. We need to make the youth game better.
Lat strain. Frankie Montas has a lat strain. Somebody that's, was supposed to be one of the big pieces for the Mets starting rotation. It's a high-grade lat strain. How does that differ? Because any kind of lat strain, any kind of oblique strain, people are like, whoa, we got to really shut it down. How does that differ from just like a regular lat strain?
High grade just matters how much tearing there was. You get a little tear, there's a little fraying there. If it tears and there's a big chunk that you can actually stick your finger in, what's called a palpable defect. That's a grade 2. And if it tears all the way, then you have to sew it back together. And if you think that's easy, go cut a steak and then try to sew it back together, because that's exactly what they would have to do. So with a lat strain, what's key is the location. The lat's a big muscle. It's the muscle just below your shoulder blade out there on the side. It's very involved in the pitching motion as one of the breaks. So the location is going to matter, how deep it is, and just how well he heals. So this is a 6 to 8 week injury. They're not talking about surgery. Again, surgery is very, very difficult. So he can get back. He's probably going to miss all of April, see his return come back into May. But most guys come back from this fairly well. The lat is actually a muscle they use in the rare case of having to transplant a muscle. You can lop off about half that thing and move it around. I know that sounds really weird, but the lat really does heal pretty well in most cases.
One more on the Mets while we're on them. How do you handle Kodai Senga? So he had a shoulder strain. That was the arm problem for him, obviously. And then the calf, I think, was what happened later on. I'm less concerned about that. I know with a calf, you got to give it time, but shoulder is that still the bad word, the worst word in baseball? And for someone that barely pitched last year, how do you make sure you keep him on the mound? Because the Mets already lost Montas for probably half the season. Senga's really good when he's out there.
Yeah. The calf injury in his first game back was just absolute quirk. It was one of those things you don't often see. Shoulder, you do worry about. We didn't have much of a sample size with him. We saw him come back. He had a really good game before the calf injury, so the stuff should be there. All the reports I've heard from the Mets are that he's healthy. They're not too worried about it. Things healed up. What you worry about is anytime there has to be surgery, because there are so many moving parts. An elbow is a hinge. It bends. Everybody, it's a hinge. Even I can fix a hinge if it breaks on a door. A shoulder does so many things. It moves in so many different directions. There's so many muscles and tendons and ligaments and capsules and labrums and everything else. To put it back together, surgeons often say it's like putting together a puzzle without the box top. So getting it back in just the right way with just the right tension is really, really difficult, even comparing it to the other shoulder, which is what you'd normally do, because pitcher's right shoulder is not the same as his left shoulder, no matter which way you go. So I think with Senga, they've done all the right things. The question is, how do you keep any pitcher healthy, let alone one that's putting as much force on there? I think the Mets are better equipped to do this. They're one of the teams that are really taking sports science seriously. They've got one of the best biomechanists and workload specialists there in the front office. So I do have some positive hopes for Senga this year.
That's good news for Mets fans. All right, I have one more pitching question for you. Spencer Strider will come back at some point. I think the uniqueness there is the brace surgery, right? That's a newer concept. Do you know much about it? And we don't really have a ton of long-term research on it for baseball yet, do we?
Yeah, we do. We've actually been doing this surgery for a long time. I wrote the first article about it in 2016 after hearing just a ton of surgeons at a convention back when PBATS did that. Uh, Everybody was excited about this. And here we are almost 10 years later, and we're not seeing the benefits from it that we were told. In almost every other sport, well, even in baseball, I mentioned the thumb, guys are coming back in half the time. So the theory was guys were going to come back from half the time. When Dr. Jeff Dugas down in Birmingham was starting to do elbows, we were seeing really, really quick return times. Now, these were high school kids who just wanted to play their senior season. These weren't, $1 million athletes that have to think about a career. So they were willing to take some short-term risks. But again, these long 18-month rehabs, they're ridiculous for Tommy John. They shouldn't have been. You can go all the way back to Tommy John, the original, the guy, rather than the surgery. It took 18 months because he had a pretty major complication and had to have surgery again to move a nerve. You don't have that today. We should be getting these guys back in 9 to 12 months, not 14 to 18 like we are. We have to fix this rehab. And there are people like Mike Reinold, Alan Jaeger, a ton of people that have put work into whether we can get a better rehab rather than using, everybody goes back to the 120-foot mark and limiting people, which is actually, Frank Jobe did that because that was the room he had in a parking lot that led up to the training room in Vero Beach. That's how old this is. They're not even in Vero Beach anymore. That parking lot is gone.
Wow, I'm laughing at that because wow, that's funny. It hasn't changed. The Pirates made a big move. They got Spencer Horwitz.
Yeah,
he's had a chronic wrist. Now he's just having wrist surgery now. Why didn't the Pirates do something about this, or did they know when they traded for him? And what exactly is he having? Because I've had my handmade out. That's a 4 to 6 week thing, but most guys can come back a little bit quicker. So what's going on with him and his wrist?
Yeah, I wish I could give you the details, but they've been very, very close with this. They did know there was a problem. He passed the physical, but you can pass the physical just because they want you to. They didn't think it was going to be a serious problem, but as he was ramping up for the season, doing his work ahead of spring training, it flared back up. The Pirates took care of it. He did have the surgery. I think it was 10 days ago. They hope he's going to be back near the start of the season, probably not at opening day, but they haven't said yet what it is. I've heard 2 or 3 separate things. They all have about the same timeline. They have all about the same outcomes. So I haven't pushed too much. You got to save those favors for when you need them. But with Horwitz, we normally see guys come back from this really well. The tough part for the Pirates is he didn't make many other moves. He was one of the guys who they were counting on to get them a little bit better. And if he's out, they don't really have a backup. I mean, they're going to be moving guys around from the infield who were, slap hitters up the middle. That's not who you want at first base.
If only there weren't a billion first basemen available the entire offseason at all levels of pricing, many of which are super productive players. And I know Spencer Horwitz could be that guy too, but
yeah,
they're not building the depth because they're not allowed. They don't have the budget for it. I mean, beating a dead horse, but it is what it is. And that puts them in a bad spot. 1 or 2 injuries and the lineup's going to look like crap. So, but let me tell you how I really feel. Will, this was great. Thank you so much for joining us. We had a lot to catch up on, so we'll do this throughout the season. And obviously on your way out here, just let everyone know where they can find more information on a more consistent basis from you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me at undertheknife.substack.com, where I do this sort of thing 3 or 4 times a week, cover the breaking news when it happens, and hopefully we won't have all of those. But thanks you guys for the time.